Well, 35 years of wrestling first, to answer your first question.
There's a reason no one talks about what the FBI really found during the Hulk Hogan investigation. And it's not because there was nothing to find. It's because what they uncovered was so bizarre, so inconsistent, and so deeply buried. It almost stayed hidden forever. Until now. What if I told you that buried inside the FBI's digital evidence room sat 3 secret DVDs that no one outside federal custody had seen? That the footage on those discs was so corrupted, it made seasoned investigators question what they were even looking at? That the truth about Hogan, the tapes, and the investigation only came out because someone forced the FBI's hand in court? This isn't a tabloid rumor. It's not a fan conspiracy. This is the real, documented, court-verified story of how one of the most outrageous media scandals in American pop culture spiraled into a federal standoff. And what the FBI found, or didn't want to reveal, could rewrite how we think about privacy, power, and revenge in Hollywood. So how did the federal government end up with a sex tape of Hulk Hogan? And why were they so hesitant to talk about it? Let's rewind. Back in the mid-2000s, Hulk Hogan, at the height of his fame, was secretly recorded in a bedroom encounter with Heather Clem, the wife of his then best friend, radio shock jock Bubba the Love Sponge. The tape wasn't leaked right away. In fact, it sat dormant for years, quietly changing hands behind closed doors. Then in 2012, a clip surfaced online, hosted by Gawker, a now-defunct media site known for walking the edge of legality and controversy. That's when everything exploded. Hogan sued, Gawker defended, and in the chaos, the FBI got involved. Most people thought the investigation was just about sex and gossip, but it went way deeper. Because the tapes didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone was shopping them around. Someone had edited, duplicated, and, according to court documents, deliberately tried to profit from them. That's when the FBI launched a sting operation. They obtained 3 DVDs, all labeled and cataloged as part of a broader criminal probe into extortion. These weren't casual recordings. They were official evidence. But here's where things get weird. When journalists later requested access to these materials through the Freedom of Information Act, also known as FOIA, the FBI pushed back hard. They didn't just decline the request. They redacted huge sections, withheld entire disks, and claimed that releasing the files would compromise national security and ongoing investigations. Let that sink in. A sex tape featuring a wrestling legend was being treated like a matter of federal secrecy. Gawker, determined to get the footage and documents, sued the FBI in federal court. What followed was a courtroom drama no one saw coming. The FBI admitted that the files it submitted, the very files central to its own investigation, had technical issues. Some of the footage was silent. Other portions had mismatched audio and video. Investigators couldn't even determine which disc matched which transcript. The evidence was corrupted, and no one could say why. In one internal communication, an FBI official even acknowledged that errors in the submission could render the files incomplete or misleading. This wasn't just a technical glitch. This was foundational. The entire case, built on these discs, was now under question. Was the corruption accidental? Or was someone covering something up? Here's where things get even more suspicious. Court filings revealed that at least one of the discs, the one containing the most damning footage, was partially overwritten. The FBI couldn't explain how. No chain of custody error, no file transfer glitch, no explanation at all. Just a broken disk with broken data and no answers. And yet, these DVDs were used to justify investigative decisions, to inform redactions, to shape a narrative that the public couldn't access, until a federal judge intervened. In June 2015, a U.S. District Court ruled in favor of Gawker, ordering the FBI to reprocess and re-release the files with minimal redactions. The court also demanded a better explanation for corruption, pressuring the agency to admit that their original disclosures had been incomplete. This ruling was a game changer. It meant, for the first time, that the public would get a glimpse, however redacted, into what the FBI actually found in the Hogan tapes. It also meant that those 3 mysterious DVDs, once locked away in a federal archive, were now subject to public scrutiny. So, what did we learn? We learned that multiple tapes existed, far more than anyone had publicly admitted. that these tapes had been intentionally compiled, that there were scripts, logs, transcripts, and even attempted sales, enough to suggest this was no random leak. We also learned that some of the content on the DVDs included deeply controversial material, not just private acts, but offensive language and personal statements Hogan never intended for the world to hear. These elements, combined with the timing of the leak, raised serious questions. Who leaked it? Why now? And was someone trying to destroy Hogan? And here's the kicker. Even after the judge's order, not everything was revealed. Some footage remained redacted. Some names remained sealed. And to this day, we still don't know the full content of Disc 2, only that it was deemed sensitive and potentially defamatory, which raises a troubling possibility. Was the FBI protecting an investigation or protecting reputations? That question was never answered in court, and the ambiguity has haunted the case ever since. But the most bizarre twist of all is this. The very corruption that nearly derailed the investigation might have saved Hogan, because once the files were exposed as flawed, defense attorneys argued that the evidence couldn't be trusted. And suddenly, the FBI wasn't just a neutral observer. It was a player in the outcome. This brings us to the most chilling part of all. Somewhere in the FBI archives still sits footage the public has never seen. Footage that, according to court summaries, includes conversations and scenes with potentially criminal implications. No one has confirmed what those implications are. No one has admitted who's on the tape, and the redactions still in place. So the question remains, what's on those discs? And why was it so important to keep them hidden? That's the paradox we'll unlock in part 2, because once you see what really happened behind the scenes, everything about this case changes. The truth isn't just hidden, it's protected, and the next revelation might explain why. The moment the judge ordered the FBI to reprocess the hidden Hogan footage, nobody knew the real fallout was just beginning. What followed exposed not just corrupt data, but courtroom drama, conflicting testimonies, and the question of whether Hogan's own team twisted the truth. And it all started with a sting operation at a Florida hotel. Let me set the scene. In December 2012, the FBI arranged a sting. Hogan and his lawyer, David Houston, sat in a room at the Sand Pearl Hotel while Keith Davidson, the lawyer turned alleged sex tape broker, brought 3 DVDs. Davidson asked for $150,000 in exchange for suppressing and returning the tapes. What Hogan didn't realize, FBI agents were just behind the wall, recording everything. The recordings captured phone calls, DVD playback, text exchanges, every detail. And in those recordings, Hogan and Houston heard the footage together. They jumped to the part where Hogan made racist remarks. Documents later revealed Hogan described watching those tapes, yet in sworn court testimony, he denied ever knowing about multiple tapes or hearing the racist material. That was the first big contradiction they had to explain. The FBI transcripts, which unsealed later, show text messages between Hogan and Bubba the Love Sponge. Hogan wrote, "We know there's more than one tape, one that has several racial slurs, we're told. I have a PPV and I am not waiting for any more surprises." That admission completely undercut his sworn denial in court. It opened questions. Did Hogan lie under oath? Or simply forget? Meanwhile, Gawker's legal team smelled blood. They filed motions citing court audio that directly contradicted Hogan's deposition. They claimed Hogan and Houston were deceitful, and they had evidence, both the FBI sting tape and unsealed documents. But Hogan's lawyers pushed back hard. They accused Gawker of misrepresenting the context, claiming emotional distress hampered Hogan's memory. Amid this courtroom storm, another question lingered. Who altered the DVDs? Gawker argued the FBI broke the evidence. Hogan's team blamed the extortionist, Keith Davidson. But listening to what FBI agent Berlin said, after watching the DVDs alongside Hogan's attorneys, the timeline didn't add up. The DVD description from Davidson matched exactly in audio and transcript until 15 minutes in. That's when the audio jumped back to the earlier disc. Berlin called it weird dubbing at a key moment. It suggested alteration after FBI possession, not before. So the second paradox, was the FBI protecting the integrity of the case or hiding its own mistakes? While all this unfolded, more leaks came out. Gawker uncovered that Hogan had settled quietly with Bubba for $5,000 and signed confidentiality, despite claiming he didn't know he was being filmed. Bubba even admitted Hogan knew. That undercut the central claim Hogan made, that he was blindsided and violated. Gawker's leverage grew. Then the media storm hit full force. In early 2016, jurors awarded Hogan $115 million in damages, which later ballooned to $140 million, including punitive fines. Gawker filed for bankruptcy. Peter Thiel's funding, used to support Hogan's lawsuit, was widely discussed. Critics called it weaponizing wealth to silence a press outlet. Public opinion became deeply divided. A victory for Hogan felt righteous to some and chilling to others. But all the while, questions remain unanswered. Why alter the DVDs at all? What exactly was on the most controversial disc? Disc 2, the one still partially redacted. And whose interests did those redactions really serve? Hogan's legal team didn't always play by the same rules they sued Gawker for. According to court records, Hogan's counsel claimed Gawker was a target of the FBI investigation, when it wasn't. And Hogan's lawyer testified he recalled little from the tapes. Yet the FBI audio showed him reacting in real time, saying, "Wow, that's bad," to racist content. Another inconsistency. The contradictions piled up, and Gawker seized on them fast. Another surprising twist. Those 3 DVDs were labeled in ambiguous ways. The date 7/13/07, 2 labeled Hootie, and 1 with Hogan's name. Nothing matched the paperwork. No proper chain of custody. Minimal metadata. The FBI file simply listed them without explaining the discrepancies. It hints at sloppy handling, or worse, internal confusion that they later covered up. Meanwhile, the same FBI file contained a copy of a check for $150,000 made out to Davidson from Hogan's attorney. Gawker argued that showed intent to pay hush money, possibly criminal extortion. But Hogan insisted the payment was only to recover stolen property. It turned into a battle of narrative, gag order versus blackmail scheme. The FBI's own report remained inconclusive. As all this played out, the public barely knew. Gawker's archives were disappearing. The press was torn. Legal fights raged across courts in Florida and federal appeals. Hogan's emotional distress claim rested heavily not on the public sex tape itself, but on the fear that the racial remarks would be exposed. Remarks he insisted were deeply offensive and deeply private. That was the real emotional core of the tragedy, according to court filings. And then came bankruptcy. With $140 million hanging over its head, Gawker's parent filed for Chapter 11. Its flagship site shuttered. Brands sold off. A powerful media group collapsed partly over one controversial post, and the FBI's hidden footage was caught at the center of it. A staggering outcome for something nearly buried in federal evidence, which circles us back to the biggest revelation so far. At least one of the DVDs was intentionally overwritten, or at minimum mishandled, while in FBI custody. That alone cast doubt on every conclusion drawn from the evidence. It forced a question. If official evidence is corrupted, how can justice be trusted? This isn't just about Hogan or Gawker. It's about institutions, power, trust, and secrecy. The moment we knew there was more hidden on Disc 2, everything changed. But until now, no one has publicly confirmed its contents. The judge's order closed part case, but the real truth remains buried. Part 3 resolved that second paradox. It reveals what might be on Disc 2, the legacy of Hogan's victory, the true cost everyone involved, and the lessons it leaves behind. Let's begin. The public verdict is known. Hulk Hogan was awarded $140 million in damages, $115 million for compensatory, and $25 million punitive. Later settled for about $31 million. Gawker's parent company declared bankruptcy and was sold. Nick Denton shut down Gawker.com. A media giant collapsed. Hogan had the last word. But what about Disc 2? Known only as a sensitive disc, partially redacted, sealed from public view, rumors suggest the footage terrified Hogan's team. It possibly includes not only private acts, but a monologue of racist remarks and admissions of knowledge, far more damaging than any of the published clip. And since it stayed hidden even after the court order, speculation grew that it contained content with criminal implications. Maybe threats, extortion talk, or revenge plots tied back to Bubba the Love Sponge's circle or Spice Boy, an alleged leaker. The FBI wouldn't confirm. Hogan refused. Gawker criticized the secrecy, but legal standards allowed redaction for defamation risk. So the content remains a blank space in the public record, revealing ashes of influence and raising ethical questions. Was suppression about privacy or privilege? Now let's talk legacy. Hogan's win reshaped privacy law and threatened First Amendment boundaries. It shifted the legal landscape, signaling that even truthful revelations could be suppressed if deemed highly offensive or intrusive. Privacy rights gained new legal weight, even for public figures. Yet many critics feared chilling effects. Journalists, editors, media outlets asking, is this worth a lawsuit? Investigative teams now face financial peril when reporting on powerful individuals. The specter of litigation bailed out by billionaire wealth looms large. Till's secret $10 million backing of Hogan turned his lawsuit into a corporate wrecking ball. Meanwhile, Hulk Hogan himself passed away in July 2025 at age 71 amid this lasting controversy. His death revived media interest in both his wrestling superstardom and the legal saga that destroyed Gawker. Tributes poured in. The sex tape lawsuit was highlighted as one of his most consequential legacies, one that drawn together celebrity, privacy, media, and power in a single headline. Behind the scenes, heartbreak quietly unfolded. Hogan's daughter, Brooke, removed herself from his will, citing emotional trauma tied to the scandal and remarks made in the tape. Hogan's fortune, partly built on a lawsuit, came at deep personal cost. None of Hogan's heirs were compensated for the emotional impact. The legal victory left scars deeper than financial damage. Let's step back and consider, who truly won? Hogan got justice, or at least a verdict and settlement. He revealed the FBI's inconsistencies. He broke open a story about hidden evidence. But Gawker's collapse also sent a warning. Media outlets could be destroyed when they expose wrongdoing, even when they're lawful. That outcome inspired both celebration and dread. Some saw Hogan as a privacy hero. Others saw a billionaire-funded vendetta. Solar privacy advocates cheered. Free speech defenders worried. The fallout shaped debates about media accountability and corporate power. Financially, Hogan walked away with tens of millions. He owned real estate, had business ventures, and maintained cultural icon status. Yet the emotional cost for his daughter, for his privacy, for public trust in institutions, suggested the true cost far exceeded jury dollars. What does this story teach us? First, never assume buried evidence isn't critical. Even flawed or redacted files can change case outcomes. This corruption wasn't a glitch, it became leverage. Second, power in the courtroom isn't only about right. It's also about who can fund it. Peter Till's armchair legal bankroll showed how money can silence media institutions. Third, privacy battles with public figures evolve into public lessons. Courts and newsrooms must balance curiosity, rights, and consequences. Lastly, the unknown content of Disc 2 remains a symbol. Some truths are still hidden, protected, not revealed. So let's bring it all together one last time. Uncover the existence and corruption of FBI-held DVDs, hidden evidence, technical failures, and a federal judge forcing disclosure. Reveal courtroom clashes. The sting at the hotel, contradictory testimonies, chain of custody puzzles, and the eruption of Gawker's leverage. Now shows the fallout. A landmark legal battle. Changing media law. Hogan's legacy. Personal pain behind the headlines, financial lessons about influence, and the haunting unknown contents of Disc 2. If you think the story ends at $140 million or a lawsuit, you're missing the point. The real narrative is about how power controls truth, how courts shape culture, and how secrets, even corrupted ones, can still reshape reality. Now here's what you can do next. Explore a deep dive documentary, Nobody Speak, Trials of the Free Press, which chronicles the broader implications of Hogan versus Gawker and the role billionaires can play in media collapse. It adds emotional weight and wider context to the legal drama. And consider watching newly unsealed court transcripts. Even if Disc 2 remains unseen, the words of FBI agents, attorneys, and Hogan himself give us a window into what happened. enough to question, reinterpret, and reevaluate.